I have a Corona knitting machine group on Facebook, and in that group, the question came up as to how to effectively use the full fashion decrease on Corona machines, because they are constructed a little bit differently than the other machines you might be familiar with. I promised to experiment and try to find an effective technique, so I decided to do that by making this hat. That way, I would get lots and lots of chances to use a full fashion decrease movement while decreasing across the entire width of the hat. What I did is a little bit unorthodox. You can see some of the decrease lines here. Rather than decreasing across the work, moving all right or all left, I decreased towards the center so that all of my decreases emulated the same motion we make in a normal full fashion decrease, picking up a few stitches and moving them inwards so the outer edges of the work get narrower. For something like a sleeve, we would normally be decreasing using a 2 or 3 prong tool. Here I used a wider tool, but that's a greater challenge. So if I can manage it with the big tool, you can definitely manage it with a 2 or 3 prong tool. And at first I was rather awkward, but I believe I have it down, so I'm ready to share with you. As we go along, I will share the numbers with you so that if you want to make a hat pretty much like this one, you can do so. Cast on 82 stitches with E-wrap and knit a hem. This is a soft number 4 yarn. My hem is 20 rows long. My stitch size is set to 5 on the dial. When the 20 rows are complete, lift the E-wraps and hang them on the working needles. For the rest of the hat, I turned up the stitch size to 7. Next, 20 more plain rows before we begin decreasing. For the first part of the decreasing, I experimented with an assortment of techniques, starting with this 3-prong tool. And it's true that on a Corona, the needles tend to jump around a little bit more than you might be accustomed to on, say, a Brother. As I worked, I discovered that my best bet was to pull down with one hand, the hand not using the tool, on the fabric, which controls not only the fabric, but to some degree the needles. After I got a little bit more comfortable, I changed to a 7-prong tool and discovered this. Let me slow down. The most reliable way to reseat those stitches on their new needles is to make sure every prong of your tool is definitely in a needle hook, and then rotate upward with the hand that holds the tool while at the same time continuing to pull downwards on the fabric. It's super important to make sure the tool is properly engaged with the needle hooks and to keep some pressure on it, pulling sort of outwards all the time so that the hooks can't let go. And in order to do that, you're going to need very good light. Your needles may not naturally stay aligned in a straight line, so you may find that controlling the needle butts with one hand while you're setting up your tool alignment is helpful. It would be nice if we had 3 hands, but we don't. We can alternate duties for one of them. Starting right about at this moment is when you need some outward pressure to make sure that the tool stays seated properly in the hooks. The biggest challenge is to get the stitches from their needles onto the tool, and I didn't find I could get it to happen automatically. So putting one hand underneath and pulling the fabric upwards and towards yourself away from the machine seems to do the trick. I found that I could move 2 batches of stitches until there was a 2 needle space opening, and that was the largest space that I could manage to work with without putting so much stress on the stitches that they tended to just pop back off. So after that point, you need to move stitches over gradually and then move them again if another decrease is necessary. Here I'm moving the last 5 stitches closer to the other stitches using a 3-prong and a 2-prong tool. And now, having eliminated the extra spaces, I can continue to decrease across. So let's review how it feels when you're doing it. Engage the tool and double check that all is well. Pull the fabric onto the tool. It may help to first close the latches manually. Now move over, engage the tool again, making very sure that all of the needles are actually in the openings of the tool. Rotate your hand upwards and pull the fabric downwards to get the stitches settled on their new needles. Man, what if you drop one, as I just did? It is not a disaster. We have no weight on the fabric and therefore no impetus to run. Find a stitch that's still good in the column of stitches, hang it on the needle, and relatch whatever has run. After a decreased row, I found it helped quite a lot to bring all the needles forward and knit the first row back from hold. Just so you know, there is an alternate way to decrease evenly across the row, even if you don't have a garter bar, and if you can't get comfortable with the method I'm showing you. A circular hand knitting needle can be inserted through all the stitches. They can be removed from the machine and rehung on the machine, doubling some up. Here I've moved the circular needle to the other end of the work so I have access to where I want to do the decreases, and I'm slowly withdrawing it as I rehang the stitches in the pattern that I want. Honestly, I found this easier, but I think it's probably because I've done it quite a few times before. As the work continued, I got better and better at the big full-fashion decreases using the 7-prong tool. I think it's just a matter of getting comfortable with the simultaneous actions needed. For the hat that you were looking at, in case you're making it, decrease every 7th stitch across the row, then knit 4 rows, and do that 6 times. After the final decrease, knit 2 final plain rows, cut a long yarn tail, thread it through all the live stitches, and gather off. Stitch across the gathered in top to secure the crown, and then stitch down the length of the hat with any seam you prefer. I generally mattress stitch this kind of hat. The way I worked, decreasing towards the center from both sides, produces this straight panel. And I realized after the fact I would have been better off not starting in the very center. These are stitches numbered 1 to 7 on the right half of the machine, and I moved them to the left. Therefore, my center panel ended up slightly off-center. It really doesn't matter for this project because it was an exercise in decreasing, and this will make a donatable charity hat. But for this panel to be worn center front, the seam must be slightly off-center in the back. But if you use the pattern, I recommend moving stitches 4 to 10, which will keep your straight panel centered if you follow all the other steps the way I showed you. So to summarize, full fashion decreasing is highly possible on the Corona. It just takes a little bit of adjustment to your technique and some practice.